And finally, we have the new Warlock patron, the Noble Genie. So this first ability is weird. It has a lot of text. A lot of text. So I'm just going to summarize it briefly for you. So, your patron gives you a magical vessel. It can be one of these things or something different. If you lose your vessel, you can perform a 1-hour ceremony, whatever. If you die, it goes away. As an action, while you are holding the vessel, you can link up to another creature, a willing creature. This link, this tether, lasts 1 hour, or until you use this feature again to tether to a different creature, until the bound creature is reduced to 0 hit points, or until the creature gets too far away, over 100 feet away from you. While you're tethered, you have the following benefits. You gain a bonus to your perception checks equal to your charisma modifier, and when you cast a spell, you can deliver the spell from your space or the bound creature's space. The tether lasts 1 hour, and you can create the tether a number of times equal to your charisma modifier. You regain all expended uses of this tether when you finish a long rest. Okay, so that's a lot. Essentially, you have this thing. It can be a ring, or a bottle, or a lamp, or something like that, and you use it to link up to another creature. It can be your familiar, it can be Fighter Bob, it can be whatever. While you're linked up, you gain a bonus to your perception checks, and you can cast spells as if Fighter Bob were casting them from his space. Great. That's weird. That's a lot of text for not a lot of bonuses, but alright. Essentially, you get really far extended range on your spells, is I think the main purpose of this ability. You get an extra, basically 100 feet max range added to your spells, which can be very useful. Some things about this ability, however, are kind of weird. So it is an action to link to a creature. The tether then lasts 1 hour. You can tether again a number of times equal to your charisma modifier. So after, say, a short rest, which warlocks are very prone to taking, you would have to relink again, and you have a limited amount of times you can link, which is interesting. And also, if you're, say, caught unawares, you would have to spend your first action of the combat linking to gain not really a lot of bonuses. And there's a lot of things that can end the tether. So yeah, I'm really confused about this ability and where it quite sits when it comes to like power levels. It seems like there's a lot of disadvantages for really not a lot of advantages. But let's continue. 6th level, Elemental Resistance. Your patron grants you protection from an element. Whenever you finish a long rest, you gain resistance to acid, cold, fire, or lightning damage your choice until the end of your next long rest. While the tether of your collector's vessel is active, the tethered creature gains resistance to the damage type you choose. So, okay, this makes the tether a little bit better. If you are tethered to Fighter Bob, for instance, and you know you're going to fight a red dragon, then when you give yourself fire resistance at the end of that long rest, Fighter Bob also gets resistance to fire. Great. Cool. That's fine. The tether rules are still weird and strangely restrictive, but alright. That's fine. That's a fine ability. Nothing wrong there. Protective Wish at 10th level. You are able to use your collector's vessel to wish for protection for yourself or your tethered creature. If you or the tethered creature is hit by an attack, you could use your reaction to teleport, swapping places with the creature and switching which one of you is hit by the attack. So again, great if you're linked up to, say, Fighter Bob. If you guys are in the heat of combat and then an enemy sneaky rogue type comes out and tries to stab you, you can say, "Hey Bob, do something," and swap places with him. The rogue's dagger then bounces uselessly off Bob's armor, and then Bob proceeds to crush his skull in. Great. Hopefully Bob wasn't, surrounded by enemies that you are now surrounded by, but hey, that's great. That's a fine ability. There's no limit on it. You can do it as many times as you want. All it's limited by is your reaction. You could do it every round if you wanted to. Genie's Entertainment, also at 10th level. As an action, you attempt to send a creature you can see within 90 feet of you to your patron's court. The target must succeed on a charisma saving throw against your spell save DC, or be magically drawn into your vessel and teleported to your patron's court in the elemental planes. While there, the target is stunned, and your patron marvels at the target with amusement, but brings no harm to it. The target can repeat the saving throw at the end of each of its turns, reappearing in the space it left, or in the nearest unoccupied space. Once you use this feature, you can't use it again until you finish a long rest. If the target remains in your patron's court for 1 whole minute, the genie sends the target back at the end of its turn as if it's successfully saved, and you regain the use of this feature. Okay, that's a lot to unpack. So, starting off, choose a target within 90 feet, they make a charisma saving throw. If they fail, they get essentially banished. However, they can repeat the save at the end of each of their turns, which banish doesn't let you do. You don't have to maintain concentration on this form of banish, but they can just make their save and leave. It's also once per long rest instead of once per short rest, which is like every other Warlock ability and spell in existence. But if they somehow don't make their save 10 times in a row, you get the ability back, which is unbelievably unlikely. So I'm not a fan of this ability. I think it is really weak. All right, this is a 10th level feature we're talking about. The Warlock can already just cast Banishment twice per short rest if they really wanted to. And yes, it can end if their concentration is broken, and this can't, but what is more likely? Their concentration being broken, or the target just making their save and getting out? As well, for this feature, it's once per long rest, not 2 times per short rest. And of course it has the clause of if they fail their save 10 times in a row, then you regain the use of this feature. But how often is that going to happen? I'm thinking never. So in actuality, I think this feature is pretty bad. I guess it has, some bonus range, but so does Banishment if you cast it from Fighter Bob's point 90 feet ahead of you. Like, this just seems like a worse Banishment in pretty much every aspect. So let's move on to Collector's Call at 14th level. In exchange for extending your patron's influence over the multiverse, you can call on more of their power. As an action, you can implore your patron for aid by making a persuasion check against your own spell save DC. If the check succeeds, you can choose one of the following effects. Okay, let's just pause right there. As an action, you need to make a persuasion check and beat your own save DC for one of the following effects to happen. Okay, just think about that for a second and let's move on to what the actual effects are. A creature you can see within 60 feet of you regains 8d6 hit points, average of 20, and ends one disease or condition afflicting it: blinded, charmed, deafened, frightened, paralyzed, or poisoned. Okay. That's not bad. A creature you can see within 60 feet of you has disadvantage on attack rolls and saving throws until the start of your next turn, so you don't actually get to take advantage of them having disadvantage on saving throws. But okay, you cast the Legend Lore spell without material components. Yes, that's a decent out of combat usage of this ability, sure. Whether the check succeeds or fails, you can't use this feature again until you finish a long rest. That's not good. That's very not good. Before we read any further, you need to make a persuasion check and beat your own spell save DC to have some effect happen. Effects that aren't really great, right? They're okay at best. Once per long rest, whether it succeeds or fails. And it requires an action. As an action, you make a persuasion check to have some middling effect happen once per long rest. I don't think at 14th level any of these effects are worth a once per long rest ability. Do you? A creature you can see within 60 feet of you regains 8d6 hit points and ends one condition on it. I mean, okay, but a cleric can do that with one spell. A Way of Mercy monk can do that with an action. Not quite as much healing, but it's not really for the healing, right? 20 hit points at 14th level, you don't really care about the healing, you care about ending the condition. A creature you can see within 60 feet of you has disadvantage on attack rolls and saving throws until the start of your next turn. There are a multitude of spells that can do that, and it's until the start of your next turn. You don't even get to take advantage of this effect, because this requires your action. If this said until the end of your next turn, that'd be great. Yeah, give them disadvantage on saving throws until the end of my next turn. That way next turn, I can actually use my action to do something useful, and they have disadvantage on it. So I could potentially do something, devastating. And then cast the Legend Lore spell. That's an out of combat thing. Not really going to worry about that. So, okay, already this just doesn't seem that good for a 14th level ability, considering the other Warlock 14th level abilities. But okay, let's see what else it says here. Alternatively, you can regain the use of this feature by sacrificing non-magical treasure worth at least 500 GP to your patron. This sacrifice requires the treasure to be within 10 feet of you for at least 1 minute, at the end of which you use an action to teleport the treasure to your patron's realm, provided you have the vessel of your collector's vessel in hand. So, okay, it's not once per long rest. You just need to pay to get it back. If it takes like a minute ritual, you'll probably just do that on a short rest. So it's not once per long rest. You can pay to make it be once per short rest. Now, 500 gold at 14th level, that's not a ton of gold by any means, but that's kind of insulting. I think. This is a once per long rest ability that's pretty shit, but you can make it once per short rest if you pay 500 gold during what's probably going to be a short rest or at least a break in combat. That's pretty lousy. That's pretty lousy. Honestly, I would say this ability, this 14th level ability is worse than the 10th level ability, and this 10th level ability is worse than all the other Warlock's 14th level abilities. Maybe even 10th. I mean, just think about the other 14th level Warlock abilities, right? You have Hurl Through Hell from the Fiend Warlock, which is you get rid of a target for 1 round, and when they come back, they have to make a save or take a ton of psychic damage. Right? It is a guaranteed, really good effect, even if they don't take the damage, right? Even if they only take half damage, you're still getting rid of them for a round, so you can focus on other things. The Fey Warlock can completely lock down an enemy for multiple rounds. The Great Old One Warlock, you can make an army of thralls. That one's kind of weird. We're just gonna kind of ignore that one. The Celestial Warlock, if you drop below 1 hit point, you come back with an explosion of divine fury. 14th level Hexblade Warlock, you could move your Hexblade's curse around. Like, these are all super good abilities. And Collector's Call is insulting. I don't know what level you could put this ability as written at and it would be good in its current form. Maybe 6th level? If this were the 6th level ability, it might be okay. It would still be pretty shit, but it might be okay. It wouldn't be as bad. But as a 14th level ability, it is insulting. Having to pay 500 gold to be able to use this ability more than once per long rest? What is with all of these being able to once per long rest stuff? Like, Warlocks work off of short rests. That's what they've always worked off of. Why is this all suddenly changing to long rests? If this ability were once per short rest, it would be a marked improvement. If this ability were once per short rest without having to pay a fee, it would be a marked improvement. It still wouldn't be good, but it would be better, right? This still wouldn't be good, but it would be better. So all in all, the Noble Genie Warlock just confuses me. There are a lot of weird restrictions on the Collector's Vessel tether mechanic for not a lot of benefit. You get damage resistance and being able to swap places and cast spells from their space, I guess. But like, looking through the Warlock spell list, what spells are you really restricted on range for, right? I mean, you're a Warlock, you're probably just going to be casting Eldritch Blast. Eldritch Blast has a 120-foot range. Like, how often are you out of range of what you want to hit with Eldritch Blast? How often can you convince Fighter Bob to move into a good position if you're linked with him? Now, I guess you could link up with your familiar if you go like Pact of the Chain, but then the damage resistance and the protective wish doesn't, it's kind of useless then, because damage resistance on your, 7 hit point familiar isn't really going to matter, and making your 7 hit point familiar take an attack for you, they can really only do that once. So, yeah, all in all, this just confuses me. Oh, we didn't even talk about the expanded spell list. Let's talk about that. Totally forgot about the expanded spell list. The expanded spell list, these are more options you have to learn. So unlike, say, Cleric or Paladin, you don't automatically get these spells. These are just extra options for you to choose from. So Fog, Cloud, and Sleep. Sleep's good early game, not really good late game, or even mid game. Once you hit like level 3, Sleep's not really that useful. Fog Cloud, situationally useful or infuriating. Enlarge Reduce, not that great. Phantasmal Force, could be pretty good if you're creative enough to use it. Create Food and Water, very, not combat. That's just utility. Protection from Energy, not great. Not a good use of a 3rd level spell, if I'm being completely honest. Polymorph, one of the best spells in the game. Phantasmal Killer, very good spell as well. Bigby's Hand, very good spell. Creation, again, if you're creative enough, you can find some uses for that spell. So all in all, the expanded spell list is fine. It's even good at times. I guess if you need the extended range for Polymorph, you can do so. I suppose you could link up to Fighter Bob and then polymorph him into a T-Rex with fire resistance to fight the dragon, and that would be pretty cool. I guess. But aside from that little scenario, all of this just confuses me, and it's not very good. I'm not a fan of the current form of the Noble Genie patron. So that was the subclasses part 1 little overview. Overall, some really good design choices and some not so good ones. But I'm really happy that Wizards keep putting these out, pretty regularly. I love looking at new subclasses. It's one of my favorite things to do. Taking a look at all the new options and new abilities that each class could get is pretty exciting. So that is all for today. Hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching.